Thank you and welcome to the City of North St. Paul Flood Resiliency Plan Open House. My name is Rebecca Haug. I work with WSB, which is a consulting engineering firm. They happen to be the consulting engineer for the City of North St. Paul. We have a brief presentation to talk about the Flood Resiliency Plan this evening, and Brandon Barnes with Barr Engineering will also be talking about Ramsey Washington Watershed District this evening as well. So what and why do we plan for floods? The reason you're here is because Minnesota's climates are changing. We're experiencing more frequent and extreme rainfall events. Since 2000, rain events of 6 inches are 4 times more frequent than in the previous 3 decades. Rainfall events of more than 3 inches have increased 65% and have a greater percentage of flood damage for properties occurring in basement flooding, sewer backups, and other issues to properties. This is one of the best ways for us to be able to plan for flooding and to be able to get feedback from you as the property owners who live in the community. So I thank you for being here tonight. The city will assess communities' land use plans and policies, identify and implement various flood mitigation measures to reduce risk, and work with the community to plan for and respond to before and during a flood event. So what is flood resiliency? That is the way that we try to minimize damages during times of flooding and reduce risk to people and infrastructure and provide flood storage. A lot of times we're trying to find opportunities to centralize all of this flood water. So what can you do to help? Some of the best ways are landscaping with native vegetation. Native vegetation has very long root systems that can absorb a lot of the water. They also help to keep our soils from getting compacted. Grass, like Kentucky bluegrass, has very short root systems, about like this much, whereas some of your natives have very long systems that help absorb and pull water down into the ground. Another big thing that is common practice for a lot of people is not paying attention to what the weather forecast is and running sprinkler systems. That can also increase the chances for flooding. This time of year, we're seeing flooding. Just with the snow melt, we had record snow events this year, so we do have a lot of snow. The other thing is, please complete that flooding survey. There's a QR code there. The city's website has that information, as well as we did print some paper copies. So if you would rather use paper, please fill that survey out. That is the best way for us to know what is going on in the community and how to help people. And be aware of neighborhood flooding. So maybe it's not your property that's flooding, but it's one of your neighbors. Please notify Public Works and let them know that something is going on. Notify them of any damage or any clogging of any infrastructure that you see. A common thing we see are clogged storm drains, the grates that are in the streets. A lot of times we'll get clogged up with leaves, trash, sediment, other debris. Cleaning that stuff out helps a lot. So this flood resiliency plan is focused on communities of vulnerable populations. That's what the grant funding from the Minnesota Pollution Control Agencies was for. We did stormwater modeling and looked at flood-prone areas, partnering with the Ramsey Washington Metro Watershed District, which is why they're here tonight. They've been an amazing partner for the city of North St. Paul as we've worked through this to try and identify areas and look at opportunities. And then part of the plan is also creating recommendations to help improve flood resiliency in neighborhoods. We're looking at short-term initiatives as well as long-term initiatives. The other is your feedback really does matter. So please, if you have not completed that survey yet, I can't emphasize it enough, please provide your feedback. That is what helps us determine how to move forward on this. Also include your address so we know any feedback will go into this report. Something to keep in mind to let you know about, the draft report will be going to the North St. Paul City Council workshop on May 16th, and then the final report will be going to the council on June 6th. After that, this final report will be sent to the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, and then the city will start working on some of these initiatives. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Brandon.
Yeah, good evening, everybody. My name is Brandon Barnes. I'm a senior water resources engineer at Bar Engineering. Bar Engineering serves as the Ramsey Washington Metro Watershed District engineer. So that's why I'm here this evening. For some of you that may not be familiar with the Watershed District, I just wanted to start by providing a little bit of background. The Watershed District was established in 1975, and the Watershed District was established really in response to a flood event. And so we have been working on flood risk reduction projects really ever since our inception. Our role as the Watershed District is to coordinate with other entities, cities, counties, and state agencies on drainage, flood risk reduction, essentially projects that impact flow or changes flows across jurisdictional boundaries. And a lot of times our role there is, again, to facilitate conversations and coordination, but we also contribute through funding and providing technical expertise and information in order to guide those management decisions. We also have a regulatory program that is aimed to protect the natural resources, and so we have a floodplain rule, we have peak discharge rate rules and requirements, as well as volume reduction requirements. You know, again, so those are some of the things we do, and that lines up with our mission and our goals. Here you can see there's a list here of goals that we try to achieve throughout the Watershed District, including on that list is managing or really reducing the risk of flooding throughout the Watershed District. The image on the left shows our jurisdictional boundary, and as you can see, it covers a much broader area than just North St. Paul. So North St. Paul is in the northeast kind of corner of the watershed, but the watershed area is approximately 65 square miles. All of this area eventually drains to the southwest and is tributary to the river. So one of the things that the watershed does, or has done and has done in partnership with the city, is identification of where flood-prone areas are. And this is why your feedback tonight is very important, because we use these comments, information that's gathered during public open houses like this, to validate results that come out of our stormwater model. We want to make sure that where we are identifying flooding, flood-prone areas lines up with the feedback that you're sharing with us. When we run those models, we share those results with city and county stakeholders. And then we work through different mitigation strategies, as you can see there, in order to reduce flood risk to habitable structures, so places where people live and work, reduce flood risk for roads and other local infrastructure, and then other public lands, open spaces, parks, et cetera. So that's kind of what the Watershed District does. Some things that you can do, certainly on a local scale, is creating resilient yards. The other thing that I want to point out here is the Watershed District does have a stewardship grant program. So if you have a project that may either improve water quality, improve drainage, it's possible that you may be eligible for that grant program. And so I'd encourage you to reach out, talk to the district, and have a discussion on whether or not your project may be eligible either for technical assistance or for financial assistance through that stewardship grant program. If you are interested in reaching out to the Watershed District, there's a number of ways that you can get in touch with us. Maybe the best way here is go to our website. There's a form there that you can fill out again for that stewardship grant program. Otherwise, the Watershed District does have an office in Little Canada. You can stop by nowadays that the doors are open. So thank you again for participating this evening.
We're going to open up this time for questions, so if anyone has any questions, we do ask that you speak into the mic. So Carrie will walk around and answer any questions anyone has. Brandon and I will provide answers best we can. We'll try.
Don't all speak at once.
If you don't have a question, that's fine too. I apologize for the technical difficulties as we got started tonight.
I've been dealing with water in my house since 2010. I've been dealing with the city. Last year, they were up for a grant through the DNR. The mayor and 2 council members said no, and 2 council members said yes to buy my house, to purchase my house out. I've had over 5 feet of water in my basement one time, over 2 feet of water in another time. It's not a finished basement, but it's still a problem. Me and my wife now had everything we owned in our basement the first time it flooded, so we lost everything we owned. It was like a storage spot. You didn't think that was going to happen. So my question to you is, what I've dealt with the city, and they said they can't put my neighbors right here, they can't put a pipe between my house and her house because they purchased a house behind us and built a pond. And then they let a company build 2 houses behind us, so it took away more of the water issues, but the pond, and then the city said, oh, you don't have an issue, but our street goes uphill from my driveway, but they think it's gonna go around the corner and down to the pond. And unless it fills up, it doesn't. We both almost lost our vehicles last summer. I have a full-size Chevy pickup that was almost up to the doors and had to get my truck out and honk my horn and get them out up there in the morning or in the middle of the night so they could get their car in their driveway.
The water was halfway up our driveway.
Yeah.
Speak into that.
Sorry. And then I asked if they could put a drain between mine and her house to the pond, their new fancy pond back here. And they said, no, the watershed wouldn't allow it because they wouldn't take the water from our street to help us out and put it into their pond because it might ruin Main Street or something. So my question is, why can't they put a drain in between our house to the pond to help alleviate the issues? I've been up to my belly button in my street before, in my basement. It's not fun. Man, I've been dealing with this since 2010. I've been coming to council meetings so many times, and it's stressed me out so much. But I just don't understand why why the city told me that they can't put a drain in between our house to their fancy new pond. So, sorry, that's my question. Sorry to ramble, but it's hell by our house. Oops, sorry.
I appreciate you bringing that to us. I hate giving this answer, but I need to do a little research and learn a little bit more about what's going on in your area. Your neighborhood isn't part of our focus area, so we didn't spend as much time on that area, but we can take a look at it. Brandon, I'm not sure if you're aware of anything in this area, but I think we can talk together and do a little research, talk with the city engineer, see what has been looked at already, and if there are any options.
They've said that they've done plenty of studies that the water it goes down to a drain, but there's a drain in front of her house down a ways, and it doesn't go down. One of the city council members showed up at my house in the middle of winter. I was 6 inches deep in the middle of winter when it's thawed and thaws and freezes. We can barely get our cars in our driveway. And they said, the council member shows up, he's like, oh, you just got to unclog your drain. I've been telling you guys for 10 years I don't have a drain. It doesn't go uphill. And they seem to claim that everything's just fine. Everything, the data shows, but I live there. I'm the data. I've asked so many for 10, 12, 20, or 13 years now I've been coming here dealing with this stuff.
And I imagine you've provided the city pictures. I know
Pictures,
staff's been there.
videos, pictures, everything.
We will take a look at it and see if there's some recommendations we can think of that haven't already been looked at and evaluated, and if there is some solution. I can't answer until I have more opportunity
I
to
get it.
research this.
I get it. Thank you. But
Thanks.
I'm just to be aware, my house sucks.
What are the areas that you guys are focusing on?
So let me go back to that slide here. Oops. There we go. So the areas highlighted in yellow are the areas that are the focus for the study.
And what are the pain points in that area?
Margaret Street and then the North St. Paul Urban Ecology Center. No, I don't believe it is. Or there's a map up here as well that shows these same yellow dots. And I believe, I apologize, I don't know your name, but you put a dot on the map to show where your property is.
Are there residential, like, are there homes in there, that area?
Yes. The city could not do the entire city in this plan. Unfortunately, the way these grants are set up, it's a focus area that it looks at. It doesn't look at the entire community at this point. But what this does is opens more opportunities for the city to apply for additional grant funding and study areas in more depth. But the report will have recommendations, both short-term and long-term, for the city to address flooding. They're aware of many areas besides just these focus areas that have issues, but unfortunately, your neighborhood was not the focus of this report.
Could it become a focus of this report?
It cannot. The state's guidelines are pretty descriptive as to which areas can be and cannot be.
Why didn't they contact us before all this report went down?
Can you talk in the microphone, please?
Why didn't they contact us before this report went down? Because I've been coming here, like I said, since 2010. The city should know. I have an issue. I've had an issue. I don't want to just snipe at you. I'm sorry. You're just here to do your guys' job. But it's the city's problem, an issue. And I don't understand why they said, oh, hey, this guy's had an issue for the past 13 years. Maybe we should look into that. Maybe these guys have had more issues. But I came to every city council meeting and never seen anybody with 5 feet of water in their basement. Everybody had, a foot, had to do some drywall. I didn't have to do drywall, thank goodness, and all that. I didn't have to redo my basement. But still, I lost a furnace, I've lost a water heater, I've lost someone. I had to rebuild half of my house.
And I understand your frustration. However, for this grant right now, and the report's not finalized yet. It's still in draft. The council hasn't reviewed it. This is part of that report writing. So providing your locations and the issues you're having in other parts of the community, that will be incorporated into that report. But because of the way the grant is written and the requirements of the grant, we had to focus on certain areas of North St. Paul. And your neighborhood, unfortunately, is not in what we had to focus on for this grant at this time.
How did this become the main focus for this grant? What was the major problems they had in this area?
So the grant is based on vulnerable population communities. And we have maps over here that show the vulnerable populations within the city. And what we did is we looked at the modeling, we worked with the watershed district, and these are the areas that show up, and they do have flooding issues in these areas. So that's how they were selected and how we have determined to focus on those areas.
When was the meeting for that?
There was not a meeting for that. That is based on desktop analysis, looking at mapping and modeling. It's very prescriptive as to where this study could be, And if you're not in that part of the city of North St. Paul, our focus for this report could not include those areas.
You guys gotta quit crunching numbers and start talking to citizens and stuff that deal with this stuff instead. That's what the one council member told me. She's like, oh, I looked at the data. I was
Can
like,
you talk in the mic, please?
You all need to talk to the citizens, not data. I'm so sick of hearing data and numbers and crunching numbers. Talk to your citizens who have been here, who are dealing with this stuff. The one council member told me she saw the data. I was like, you've never come to my house, and I've invited every one of the council members and the mayors to my house. I'll show you what the problem is. None of them will come over except for 2 of them. The 2 that voted yes. And I understand this. I'm gonna get my point across, because their data sucks. She wouldn't show me the data. I was like, I want to see your numbers. I want to see what you've seen. And they don't tell me. They won't show me their data. I'm so sick of hearing this data stuff. Talk to your citizens. Talk to the people who have issues. Have a meeting for it instead of backdooring everybody. It's all this politics crap.
It's part of the reason we're here tonight. Again, the report is not done. It's in a draft format. The city council has not seen the report yet because this meeting is part of what goes into that report. So your feedback will become part of the record of that report. And if you want to see data, we have data. The watershed district has data, the city has data, that you can see the areas that show up on our floodplain maps that we know have problems. And for this report, these are the areas that we focused on, that we know there are problems.
I mean, if we're talking about data here, I bought my house in maybe this is off topic a little bit too, but it is frustrating. I bought my house in 2020. I was not aware of this issue. Looked back on Zillow a year and a half later, and now I see that my house is considered a flood zone. So there should be some data as well. And now for us to sell our homes, now we're considered a flood zone. So there drops the price of my house. So that's it's frustrating too, so.
That's a good point. I'm a North Dakota guy. I was there during the
So am I.
69
Not a guy, I'm a gal.
flood. From 69 flood, and I've seen some pretty bad situations. But she has a valid concern. Who categorizes these people's and my property, who categorizes it that it's going to be in a flood zone or is not in a flood zone? Who makes that decision?
The Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, is the one who regulates floodplain maps. They work with the state, so the DNR works on determining floodplain mapping, and it's based on, again, models, information and data that they see, and they develop these maps. These maps do change over time, because again, as I said when we started this presentation, we are seeing changes in our precipitation patterns that are increasing flooding in areas. So these maps do get updated on a regular basis, but the DNR does work with communities and looks at the areas that they know are flood prone. And there's different levels of floodplain. You have a floodway and a flood fringe, and there's 100-year, 500-year, there's different components of the floodplain. But those maps are reviewed, they do when they're being updated, they go out on public notice for people to comment. Your realtors should be informing you if you are buying property in a floodplain, because you should be purchasing flood insurance if it is a known property for that. Unfortunately, that's not always shared with homeowners, so then that burden falls on the person buying the property to do research to find out if there's wetland or floodplain or where drainage and utility easements, those types of things are on their property. I don't know, Brandon, did you want to add anything additional?
No, I think that that's a good summary, that in terms of flood classification, that those maps in the National Flood Insurance Program, those are from FEMA through the DNR. And those flood areas, those flood zones, those are, typically areas that are, have a larger drainage area to them. They're oftentimes ponds, depressions, creeks, where there's that defined drainage where you'd look at it and go, okay, water ponds here, you know, that type of thing. The type of flooding that we're talking about tonight and that I've heard comments this evening is, you know, there may be different types of flooding, but I've heard comments this evening about alleyways, catch basins. That's more localized flooding, and a lot of times that more localized flooding won't show up on the FEMA maps and therefore get characterized as a flood zone. And so for those types of flooding, that's where public open houses and discussions like this have a role, because getting feedback from you, getting that documented into a report, archived, memorialized, so that it's part of the record, that it gets published, it's in that report, it's not a comment or things that get, you know, can get lost or forgotten. It's included and it's part of that record is important, because these are the comments that inform the city, the watershed district, where this type of localized flooding occurs that may not be shown on those more regional maps. And so that's the discussion we're having here. Certainly understand how impactful flooding is. It can be very disruptive. I can only imagine what you have gone through, and so I really appreciate the comments here so that we don't lose sight of that.
Well, here's my question.
Yep.
The DNR offered to pay for half of my house last year and a grant to just take my house out and put whatever kind of drainage thing they needed to put in. So they knew about it. So how is my area not on your map? That's what I don't get. They knew about it. It's not on a data thing. Your data, heard enough of data. My house floods. It's as easy as that. And they knew about it, and the city didn't do nothing about it. So it's so frustrating and so annoying to hear all this stuff about data this and data that, and maps and this and maps that. It's not right. The DNR knew about it. They tried to help purchase my house last year. So that's what I don't get. They knew about it. How is that not one of the priorities around the city? That I guess we only have 10 houses by me. Is that what it is? And they have 50 or something? I don't know. I guess I don't know that area very well. I just know my area. But I just don't get why it's not, you know, the DNR knew about it. Why is it not on their bullseye or something? Because they tried to buy it last year.
I completely hear your frustration. I understand it. Unfortunately, like I said, this grant was focused on neighborhoods in vulnerable population areas, and we could not look at every area in this city, and you're not, unfortunately, in one of those areas for this grant and doing this report. Your comments will be included in the report, and a recommendation will be future studies and things be done in other areas of the community. Again, that's why we're here tonight, to get feedback so that we know more about what's going on. You're seeing this in your yards that can be part of the report.
Sure. Thank you.
Evening. My question is more of a residential concern. My wife and I live on Sean's Way in North St. Paul, which is a relatively new development. My house, we've been there since 1979. Justin's house, which is right next door to mine, was built in 1917, and another neighbor, Dan, was here, and he put his red dot. And actually, all three of ours are in the same area. And our issue is, our problem is, they built the Spirit Hills complex development some years ago. And about half of those houses all run off right to the corner of our 3 yards. And we've had water up it was up to within 6 feet of my door one time. Dan's had it in his, Dan's no longer here, but, and Justin's had a good portion in his yard. And what I would wonder, is there anybody, that you can talk to, a city engineer, somebody that could just give you some advice? Because we pretty much know what needs to be done. There was a runoff. When they built our house, the contractor told me it should run off right to 17th Avenue. Well, over the years, things have changed, and it doesn't run off like it should. So is there any way you can talk to somebody or have an engineer just come out? It would only take half hour just to look at it. Because I counted the houses that are contributing to the water, and that's mainly because of the way Spirit Hills was laid out. And I have one neighbor to the south, his lot is quite a bit higher than mine, so I get a lot of his too. But, that was my concern, is who can we talk to just to come, walk down in the backyard, look where it's coming from, and how do we get it out of there? We could probably do it, but we'd have to, run quick, get some pumps and start pumping it out in the street.
Yeah,
So
and
that's my concern. How do we get somebody to just take a look at it or, talk to us?
Yep. And I work with the city engineer, so I can talk to him. And again, these comments will be part of the report.
Well.
Provide information on the survey. And
Yeah.
we're gonna try our best to get to as many of these issues as we can,
Yeah.
but as
We're
you
not
all-
looking for money.
Yeah,
I would just
and-
like some advice and,
Yep. And we did, Brandon and I did talk to your neighbor before the presentation. Some suggestions they may or may not work, but some small fixes. I'm not sure if anyone has aerated their lawn at any point recently, but sometimes over time, the soils get compacted. And so by going in and kind of opening up, it can help draw water down. The other is, like both Brandon and I talked about, native vegetation does a really good job pulling water down.
Right.
And cleans and acts as a filter, helps with that. The other that I've seen a lot of times is, I'm not familiar with your neighborhood, but over time, sometimes what happens is people start to build in drainage and utility easements. Like they put in a shed and a drainage and utility easement, or they put in their fire pit, and that can back water up on other people's property. But that's something that we can include as a recommendation in the report that the city look at and evaluate. And that might be a way to work with homeowners if there are obstructions in there that maybe the city wasn't aware of, to
I
move
don't
things out.
think we have a real concern with a lot of, people changing the lay of the land.
Okay.
The aerating is a good idea, that's something to pass on. But, ours is just the fact that houses were built on a higher plane than we are, and maybe they weren't looking at the long-term picture.
Right.
Because we've got some pictures there that are pretty convincing, because we had some pretty
Your
severe
neighbors
flooding.
sent Carrie a bunch of pictures for us to be able
But,
to include as
I
part
just
of this.
would like to talk to somebody or have them come out and take a quick look and just say, this is what we could do or you guys could do.
Yep.
So we'd be willing to do that. I'd be happy to have somebody come look.
Thank you.
I'll get it back up there.
Hello, Natalie Young. I live on the 2500 block of 15th Avenue. I think it's a little frustrating for a lot of us to come here, and I understand now that there's parameters going to this grant, and that's not your guys' fault, right? And as a city, we should be taking all the grants that we can, so that's great. But a lot of this is just infrastructure that the city continues to ignore. So we have a street that is behind our homes, and it has a bad grade, there's no drainage system, and the city continues to ignore it. We've built up retaining walls, we built up the soil, we put in vegetation. We continue to have flooding in our basements and in our garages, causing significant damage. And, we're involved in this, because of townhouse. The townhouses that they built across from the church has been an issue. Getting valid information from the city has been an issue. I think all in all, the city needs to have a council meeting specific for the flooding issue. I understand, and again, I understand there's parameters you have to follow for this grant, but I think that we're all a little frustrated with it.
Thank you, and I believe someone did provide that as a comment on the board over here. So it, again, it will go as part of a recommendation to the city council that they have more frequent meetings like this to talk to the residents and learn about the issues that are going on.
Just to clarify, is that meeting the May 16th meeting that you're referring to?
That is the draft report meeting, and it's a workshop.
It's a workshop, okay. Our workshops are open to the public. There's not public feed in that, but you are welcome to sit in the chambers and listen to the discussion, and you can also watch that on YouTube.
You just answered my question.
Oh.
I think the gentleman wanted. Yep. Thank you.
So in this area right here, what are you guys planning to do with the excess water? Are you taking it outside the city limits, or are you gonna push it outwards in the skirts of the city? That's the question I have, because it's just gonna make it worse if you push it outside that area.
And we have a list of recommendations, a lot of infrastructure improvements. Again, it's going to take some time and some financing. Part of this, again, I think I've alluded to, is by the city putting together this plan, getting this feedback, evaluating what can and cannot be done, opens some doors for additional funding to help the city make improvements in this area. We're also partnering with the Watershed District. They have some plans, projects coming up that the city will work with them that will maybe help. Not sure, but we are always trying to work with each other to find opportunities. The other benefit of working with the Watershed District is sometimes grants are more available if you're partnering together, and you can leverage more of your funds and your opportunities. So it's a lot of infrastructure improvements that we're recommending that are gonna cost the city some money.
Well, there is a bona fide surplus, so they already have that money.
Any other questions? Otherwise, I want to thank you again very much for coming tonight. Please, if you haven't filled out the survey, please do that. If you have additional comments, please continue to send that in. As Carrie said, May 16th is the draft report to the city council. It is a workshop. You can come, but you cannot give feedback at that meeting. And then the final report is scheduled to go to the June 16th city council meeting. Otherwise, you are free to roam, talk to any of us if you'd like. Thank you.